and welcome back to Digital Spy. So we might not be able to gather around the water cooler to chat about the latest things we've been binging, but that doesn't mean we're not desperate to talk about our latest TV obsessions. This week, WandaVision started on Disney+. I'm David Opie, the Deputy TV Editor at Digital Spy.
And I'm Ali, the Social Editor at Digital Spy, and I'm very excited to talk about WandaVision after like 10 months, like we've been saying, 10 months of waiting. I cannot believe the day is here. This morning I got up super early. All I wanted to do was like sit on the sofa and binge. I mean, I'm glad it was only 2 episodes because it left me wanting more, but all I want to do is watch the show and talk about the show. So I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. And it just flew by so quickly, those 2 episodes even. I just wanted all the season at once. There's so many little mysteries they eke out. But yes, let's talk about more generally. What do we think of it and what do we think is coming next? So what were your first impressions?
My first impression was that I was quite shocked that it was, I mean, like obviously going into it, we knew it was going to be this big homage to kind of classic sitcom tropes, and it was going to do this thing where it progressed through like the ages of TV. But I was quite shocked that we did 2 episodes back to back, kind of black and white, and in the format they were in, without giving too much away for this bit. But yeah, overall, I loved it. It was kind of everything I wanted it to be and more. It was funny. They were really good. Their chemistry was good. Yeah, it was just brilliant. And it was so, like you said, it left you wanting more. It was really interesting, I think.
Definitely. Like the comic timing of them is so good. You know, Marvel likes to experiment to some degree. There's, like some of the films go into different genres, like Winter Soldier is a bit espionage and Ant-Man's a bit heist, but it still feels like a lot of the Marvel films play it safe because they're blockbusters. And I feel like this is the first time Marvel really, truly tapped into the creative potential of the comics and just went nuts. Like you said, I think it was really brave of them to do the whole first 2 episodes in black and white and really stick almost entirely with that sitcom format, because I don't think anyone would have fully seen that coming.
No, it's definitely interesting you say that. I think we're both big Marvel fans and obviously big MCU fans in general. But yeah, like a lot of the time, the movies, like they're kind of like different flavors of the same thing, right? They're different flavors of like ice cream, and then WandaVision is like a cake. Like it's such a different thing. Like it's not so far anyway, it wasn't like a genre twist on an action thing. It was like it was way more of a sitcom than I was expecting it to be, which I really, really liked. And like you said, yeah, the comic timing was there. Their performances are great. I was really happy to see them kind of like do something different and really kind of go with it and do something weird.
The way they experiment with form as well, you know, in terms of like the little animated sequence at the start of episode 2, I adored. It was so bewitched, so 60s, just a joy to watch. And it's just I always wanted that kind of thing for Marvel, and I'm so glad we're finally getting it. They're finally, after over 10 years, they're finally brave enough to throw the whole kitchen sink.
And I think that like that's probably part of the benefit of it being a TV show, right? Like the expectations are different, and they can do super weird stuff. The animated intro is great. It made me, and we'll talk about this I think probably when we look ahead to the rest of the show, but all of these moments got my kind of head kind of thinking about what the next lot of episodes will look like. These were obviously like a 50s and 60s TV intro, and like what's it going to look like when they're doing like an 80s homage or a 90s homage. Like I'm just so excited to see all the little tweaks and nods they do along the way.
Definitely. And I feel like a lot of the promo material in the trailer has been very focused on the first 3 episodes. So like we know there's some 70s like little genre things coming too, but beyond that we still have no idea. I'm hoping for every decade. I mean, although perhaps maybe that'll get too predictable as well. Who knows? Maybe they'll switch up after the 90s and just throw something completely new again. That's kind of the joy of this show, is how unpredictable it is. Yes, and you'll definitely. I've seen episode 3, and I can promise it gets even weirder.
Yeah. Before we talk about like specific things, and we kind of move on to more spoilery stuff. I think we said it earlier, but I kind of wanted to I was genuinely surprised at how much I like Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany in these movies. Like I think they're great, and I love those characters so much that I'm kind of always willing to meet them halfway. Yeah. But when you look maybe at some of their like roles and the performances in those movies, like they're not always given a lot of time to like do something with the character. And I came away from these first 2 episodes of WandaVision being like, oh, they're great, and like there's so much heart, and they're both so charming, and Paul Bettany is so funny, like, which I had no idea really going into this that I'd come away being like, he's hilarious. There are bits in episode 2 which I just really, really, even though they're like broad and they're kind of homages to a type of comic acting, they just land. All their lines, I think, just land perfectly.
Definitely. I think they do such a good job of balancing between actually full-on replicating that era and that kind of human comedy, but then still updating it, modernize it enough to still make it fun for us and still hint at something more underneath the surface. And I think that's such a difficult little balancing act to accomplish. And like you say, I think they were both really, I think they were underused, to be honest, in the MCU. You know, I think they're both fan favorite characters within the comics, at least.
Yeah.
They were never really fully given their dues on screen, so this is just the perfect time and the perfect format and way to do it.
Cool. Shall we can maybe move on to some more spoiler specific stuff now then, talk about some of our favourite bits from the episodes. So this is your warning, watcher, that we're going to talk in detail about these first 2 episodes. So if you haven't seen them and you just want like a flavour of the review, then this is the time to kind of check out and check back in once you've watched them. This is your spoiler warning.
Vision residents.
I would love to start chatting about Kathryn Hahn, the queen who has finally entered the Marvel Universe. About time. We love her.
Yeah, she's so great. I mean, talking about comic timing and comic acting, like every line she has, she absolutely nails. She plays this kind of like, she plays Agnes, this like nosy neighbor who appears, you know, in both periods, in both episodes. Once when she's kind of like the 50s neighbor, and then again as kind of Wanda's like 60s neighbor. But yeah, she's just so funny, and every line she has made me laugh.
I'm so happy. I feel like some audiences wouldn't have really come across her before. She does a lot more indie stuff and smaller roles. So yeah, I'm super excited to have that spotlight on her. And also the way her character, potentially spoilery, is a very important Marvel character who is Agatha Harkness, Scarlet Witch's mentor and confidant, who sometimes works with her and occasionally has worked against her. And I think the show has definitely hinted at this, right?
Yeah.
She knows more than everyone else seems to know within.
Yeah, she's in on it. I think earlier we spoke about that like the show does a really good job of like the balancing act of like, it's like old kind of homage comedy and sitcom stuff, and then like modern sensibilities. And I think the other thing it balances, and we'll talk about this, I guess, more broadly, but with Kathryn Hahn's character, she's such a good microcosm of what the show is doing in terms of making you laugh, but then also there's always this slightly like sinister tinge. Like every third or fourth line or joke that she delivers, she then also kind of has this, there is something not quite right about her character, and you immediately kind of see that. And like you say, she definitely knows what's going on. There's that scene in episode 2 when they're going to the kind of like neighborhood committee meeting, and Wanda's like, oh, maybe I'll just be myself, and like the music stops and Agnes is like, no, and like her face is so deadpan. And it's just, it plays off so well. Definitely,
like, and that's really complex acting. I think like you're fully homaging this silly, almost slapstick humor, but then there's also just this tiny tinge or something out of reach. And I feel like that's the same for Wanda and Vision too, but maybe not so much sinister. But I feel like there's almost this sadness. There's this tiny tinge of sadness just out of reach that, like, almost like Wanda knows things aren't right, but she can't put her finger on it. And I think both the actors do such a great job of that and the comedy simultaneously.
Yeah, we get the big version of that is in that first episode over dinner, which is in the trailer as well, when Vision's boss, they come for dinner and they're like, they're sitting down and the boss and his wife are like, where are you from? Why don't you have kids? When were you married? Like, when's your anniversary? And they both kind of like freeze. And you see that, like, you're right, you see the sadness in their face of like, wait a minute, something's not adding up. Because obviously, as we know, like, as far as we know, Vision is dead, and none of this is coming out of nowhere. From, you know, the last time we saw Wanda, she was not living her 50s fantasy in like this neighborhood. And yeah, that balance, and it's all in the eyes. I think, like, Elizabeth Olsen, every time the camera just like locks onto her face, and she kind of, you see her eyes like quiver. It's really good. It definitely is communicating so much, and makes me want to know already, like, what the hell is going on.
The series didn't even attempt to ever even slightly explain what was happening. Threw us instantly into this 50s world, which I adore. And going back to that Kathryn Hahn moment you mentioned, when they go to that the committee meeting, and she's a bit nervous about introducing Wanda. She says this is maybe very specific and very niche, but she says something about the flowers, be careful of the roses or something for the Dottie. And then ever since she said that line, I kept seeing flowers and roses everywhere. Like Wanda wears this rose outfit at one point. Another character has roses all over her. Yeah, I think the three, they remark on the roses as well, again on a hedge. But I have no idea what that is. I've been Googling, I've been trying, but I have no clue.
Well, yeah. I think that's testament to, and maybe just before we move on, I guess, not really talking about Agnes anymore, but like part of the joy of this watching WandaVision is that like part of the like left part of my brain is like, this is just a really fun, interesting TV show. It's a good sitcom. There's some like good mystery elements going on. And then the other part of my brain is like, there's something else MCU-y happening. And so you can't help but like dig for those Easter eggs and start to kind of notice stuff before it happens. In episode 2, obviously ends with the talent show and the chorus of people being like, where are the children? Think of the children, where are the children? And like, obviously going into that, you're like, okay, something is going to happen. And then the episode 2 reveal at the end. But before that, you know, in episode 1, when Vision's boss's wife is like, why don't you have kids? And it's such a direct question. And there's another bit in that Catherine Hahn moment that we're talking about where she's like, oh, you know, schools, you could get, you want to be on the good side of the schools. Like, it's already setting that. I was already like kind of pulling on threads and looking for Easter eggs of like what was to come. Yeah, it's just doing such a great job of teasing us.
As we've gone on, the Marvel universe has become more and more complex, and you know, in terms of on the screen, and so it's been harder for newcomers to just jump in at any point.
Yeah.
But I feel like WandaVision does such a good job of, it's perfect for a newcomer. You don't need to know anything going in really, but at the same time, like you said before, there's so much integral MCU stuff going on, just out of reach.
Yeah. So just on the margins, it is great. It's a really interesting way of doing a TV show, because I think go down these random paths, but like when you think about the other Marvel shows in recent memory, like the Netflix ones, they weren't the MCU, but in some ways they really, really were. Like they'd be like, oh, remember what happened in New York? Like it wasn't when they did mention it, it wasn't subtle. And same with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Like it's nodding and winking in a very different way to WandaVision, which is like, it's letting you do all the kind of, so far letting us do all the work. We're talking about them sort of anyway, so let's talk about the other thing I want to talk about specifically is the kids and all the potential for kids, and the end of episode 2, when obviously Wanda looks down and she's like miraculously pregnant. We've seen in the trailers, we saw a couple of shots of like cribs and toys being thrown out, and obviously it's hinting to us that Wanda is going to have these 2 sons. And if you're a comic book fan, you're probably very familiar with Wanda's sons, or sons by proxy, Billy and Tommy, who go on to be, you know, big characters of the Young Avengers. Billy becomes Wiccan, Tommy becomes Speed, and they're massively fan favorite superheroes, fan favorite characters, I think both for you and I as well. So I'm very excited that even in episode 2, we're starting to get something is happening with the idea of Wanda and Vision's children.
Definitely. And I've been waiting so long for the Young Avengers on screen. We just need it. It has to happen. Yeah. The old guard are great, keep them going, but like that's such a good, fresh way to keep expanding the MCU. Because they're relatively new characters in the comics too. Yeah. They're instantly fan favorites because they really expand on the legacy characters and create something new. And the MCU has already been, in other ways, teasing the Young Avengers in a more roundabout way. You know, you've got Ant-Man's daughter, Cassie Lang.
Yes.
Who's become Stature in the Young Avengers, and then there's also
we've got Kate. I mean, it's not happened yet, but obviously the Hailey Steinfeld has been cast as Kate Bishop in Disney's Hawkeye series, and Kate Bishop is kind of the Young Avengers version of Hawkeye, and again a character that people, myself included, absolutely love.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing that groundwork. If you want to, me and you have been talking about whether Patriot, who's kind of the Young Avengers Captain America, might be teased in Falcon and Winter Soldier. I'm already thinking about what comes out of Loki, because the version of Loki in the Young Avengers is actually this weird time travel younger version of himself. So I can imagine a world in which our Loki from the MCU, weird stuff happens. So that's suffice to say that like I wouldn't be surprised if the groundwork gets laid more and more throughout WandaVision for these 2 boys, and I want to see them on screen so badly.
I'm just living for the idea of like the Avengers are all captured or defeated somehow, and then these young Avengers rise up, and then they become the premier team.
And it makes sense.
Yeah, and also in terms of queer representation, you know, Billy is such a huge gay character in the comics. famously, Marvel hasn't really tapped into that at all yet on screen. Eternals is hinting at it, and hopefully that will be handled well. But as Endgame showed, Marvel kind of has a checker.
Yeah. I mean, I'm tentatively optimistic about Eternals, but I think like you never know how it's going to be played. And I think with Billy, Billy's queerness and Billy's gay relationships are like part of his character so integrally that there's no way you do Billy without Teddy, and there's no way you do Billy without that queer relationship. So yeah, very excited to see if that. I mean, who knows what WandaVision has in store for those two, for the boys? It might be that it's a dream, or they're there one episode and gone another. But already excited to see the groundwork being laid.
The House of M storyline that people think this is based on came about because Wanda lost her children in the comics and had that psychotic break. I do feel like that's happening here. Maybe not because of losing her children, but I strongly think Vision's death pushed her over the edge, and Wanda's created her own reality, her own dream of what she wants the world to be, and that includes the Vision coming back. Yeah. Although it looks like this time around she's sucked in some people from this actual real town by accident. And,
something specific I want to talk about slightly was the surprise inclusion of Emma Caulfield in episode 2, also known as Anya from Buffy. It was such a good, I don't know, I was very happy to see Emma on screen again. And speaking about characters being kind of sucked into what we think might be Wanda's new reality, I loved the scene where, obviously that big moment in episode 2 when they're having the conversation, the radio crackles, you hear a voice, like a military voice on the radio that's like, Wanda, who's doing this to you, Wanda? It's a great moment. And then it cuts to Emma Caulfield and she's like, who are you? Where am I? And her accent changes, which is such a good detail. Her voice changes from being this kind of 60s kind of put on affected voice to being a very kind of normal modern voice. She's so good.
She's so good. I adored her. And it's like a day hasn't gone by since Buffy.
I know, she looks the same.
Just as incredible as always. I love her. That's a very pivotal moment, I think. It's our first real obvious clue that something is happening beyond this bubble, and that the residents aren't just make-believe. There is something real going on underneath the surface. And then I guess that all kind of ties in again when the radio returns at the end of the episode, when they just found out Wanda's pregnant and everything's looking great and hunky-dory, and then that banging happens again. This time it's not free, it's something messed up happening in the street, and then that beekeeper pops out. Yeah,
that's so great. The end of the episode is so weird. Like, you have the double whammy of she's realizes that Wanda's pregnant, the color changes, it becomes like a bright, colorful 70s inspired set. It appears, and then the banging happens. They go outside, and you can see in that moment the way that Wanda and Vision interact is completely different as well. Like, Vision's like behind Wanda, which I thought was really interesting. He's like, "What's going on?" Like, there's real fear in Vision's voice there, which I thought was a cool detail. And then, like you say, this crazy man in a beekeeper costume steps out of a drain.
Yeah, maybe the Visions subconsciously knows somehow that he's not supposed to be there, or maybe that this reality is the only thing keeping him here. So any potential threat to that reality, Beekeeper clearly represents, is a threat to him and his existence.
Yeah, and the Beekeeper has a logo that we see a couple times throughout the episode for Sword, which I'm not going to try and explain the acronym for, but it's suffice to say it's like what if S.H.I.E.L.D. But for kind of like paranormally, alien alien-y stuff, essentially, the short version. I'm sure I'm going to get roasted for that kind of abrupt version, but we see the Sword logo at the end of episode 1 when the kind of shot changes and we go to color just before the credits roll. There's like a screen and then there's the Sword logo on one side of it, and we see it again, I think, before the Beekeeper. But when the Beekeeper steps out of the drain, on the back is this big Sword logo. Do you have any kind of good theories about what's going on here with either Beekeeper or Sword?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it looks like Sword was first hinted at back in Spider-Man's last film, in the end credits, when Nick Fury's in space and he's chilling, he's like, I've got some work to do. That seems like a big nod that he's starting Sword, because as we know, Sword is now obviously a part of the MCU officially. In terms of their role, in the first 2 episodes, they don't tease much beyond that. But if you look in the trailers carefully, we have seen that the government are very much, or some kind of government agency is very much involved, looking in, and that they're setting up kind of perimeters and they're trying to see what's involved. And I wouldn't be surprised if that crackly voice on the radio is someone from Sword. And perhaps they know Wanda's in there and they know something's going on, but the way I think it's interesting the way he asks, because he doesn't say, "Oh, Wanda, snap out of it," or anything. He's like, "Wanda,
who's doing this for you?"
Which implies either they don't realize Wanda is responsible, or it also implies that there is another even higher power beyond this who's actually pulling out the string. Which I think will be really interesting. Like, it might not be a big bad in the traditional sense, and there's also internet rumors. People are wondering, is it Mephisto, which is basically Marvel devil? There's also rumors it could be Baron von Strucker, the Nazi Hydra guy who gave Wanda her powers. And that kind of works as well, because in the second episode, there's that advert of the soap.
Which is great. Those advert intermissions, both of them. I hope we get one. I imagine we're going to get one every episode. And they are great. The first one for, it's Stark Industries. I can't remember what it is now. But yeah, the second one, you get the Strucker...
Strucker watch.
Strucker watch, yes, of course. And it has the little Hydra logo on the bottom.
Definitely. And what I like about the adverts too is it's not even just the product and the name drops, but there's also even the way they sell the product kind of supports this theory that Wanda has created a reality. Because in the second one, it talks about forget your past, look to the future. And it's like, well, of course Wanda wants to forget her past. Her past sucked. The Vision dead. Like, So in terms of the future of WandaVision, obviously we're only 2 episodes in, we have 7 to go. Everything is so up in the air, so up in the air. There's so many twists, like reality can literally bend it anyway. So it's not easy to full on predict beyond what we've said about the Young Avengers, etc. But one thing we do definitely know for sure is that Wanda will play a big role in Doctor Strange's next movie, which is subtitled The Multiverse of Madness, I believe. And then with the multiverse coming into play, that just lends itself so well to this whole reality-altering power that Wanda has in the first place. So it'll be interesting to see whether Wanda emerges in WandaVision as a hero, one who can help Doctor Strange fix whatever might be going on in the multiverse, or if she is somehow the cause of what's happening and reality breaking down.
Yeah, I think it's her kind of the announcement last year that Elizabeth Olsen would be in Doctor Strange 2 and it should be kind of pivotal role. It was cool because it starts to do this thing that the MCU have been doing a bit where like every movie is kind of an Avengers movie. Like there's so much character crossover. Like Doctor Strange 2 was never just going to be Benedict Cumberbatch and that accent like walking around. It was always going to be someone else, and it's cool that it's Wanda. But I think the cool thing about Scarlet Witch as a character in the comics is that she always flip-flops kind of between being a hero and a villain and an anti-hero. So I could quite easily see there's like 2 endings, right, for WandaVision. It's either it ends well or it ends badly. And if it ends badly, then yeah, maybe it does set up Wanda to be this big bad, at least for the next movie or so.
Could be. Although like you mentioned, she has been a villain in the past in the comics. I also don't want that to happen to her on screen. Because I feel like there's this Marvel trope so often of these amazing, powerful, strong women, like with Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, the Invisible Woman, and they always end up being twisted and turned into an evil. You know, like their powers are almost too great, but then they're like, oh, the women are too strong. You know, there's definitely that bias in the past.
100%.
I'm really hoping that doesn't happen again. But also, it's interesting what you mentioned about her flipping between hero and villain, because she also straddles the lines between mutant and Avenger. And now we know Fox and Marvel are together, X-Men is coming in the future.
I'm making noises because, that is exciting.
I mean, Wanda seems like the obvious key, the obvious way to bridge that gap and introduce the X-Men. Whether it's, combining that Fox movie continuity or bringing in a brand new version of the X-Men, you can say. But,
you can see kind of our theories around how this might tie together. I'm not going to try and do the pointing thing, but Gabriella, who works with us, did a great breakdown of like how Marvel might bring in the X-Men and into the MCU. And I think the idea that we affectionately call it a reverse House of M, or I do, is definitely like a potential thing. And also like the next phase of Marvel movies that we kind of know about in terms of like Spider-Man and, well, specifically like Spider-Man and Doctor Strange 2 seem very much concerned with the idea of like multiverses and reality and stuff. So I would not be surprised if, even if, like you say, maybe it's not, she becomes intentionally a villain. Maybe it's like something accidental and she kind of like, part of what she's doing is like, oh yeah, and I also ripped a hole in reality because I'm a witch and I can do that. But I'm excited to see her on screen in some form again, because we don't necessarily know that WandaVision is going to be a continuing series. That there's no guarantee that we're getting a series 2, and it feels quite self-contained already. So
Marvel have they've said some Disney Plus shows will be extended beyond season 1, but just some. They haven't specified which ones. So yes, WandaVision could definitely be a one-off limited event.
And it feels like it has that vibe. Like, I'd be surprised if Marvel went on to produce a 5-season sitcom starring. I would watch it. It's starting WandaVision, but yeah, we shall see. The story can't end with like, oh yeah, and they just like forever lived in this time-hopping sitcom fantasy. Like,
yeah,
if you've read Tom King's Vision series, Vision creates kind of his own fantasy in this sort of way. He builds his own like suburban life with a wife and kids, and then, you know, things go wrong as they often do. And like that version of the story ends because like you can't be a superhero and just pretend that you like can chill. Like, as much as like Hawkeye wants to do that on that farm, like that isn't, you know, it doesn't work out that well. So we shall see how WandaVision kind of turns out.
Okay, so that's all we had time for to chat about WandaVision today. But stick with Digital Spy, because every day we're throwing you Easter eggs, we're throwing you theories, we're throwing you analysis. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, so please keep updated there. And don't forget to also just like and subscribe to Digital Spy on our YouTube channel. And also, of course, as is mandatory, please follow us on social media too. If you want, you can also follow me. I am David Opie, O-P-I-E, at Twitter.
And you can follow me on Twitter at AEB Griffiths. I'm Ali Griffiths. And yeah, you can follow us on social across Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, everywhere you could possibly want at Digital Spy. And we shall see you next time, all over the shop.